Welcome to Film Phreeks. This is Justin Llewellyn.
And Eddie Williams.
And tonight we're going to be doing another retrospective of two movies that are in a franchise that is about to have its third entry coming out here soon. And this is one of the most cult hits movies that came out in the late 80s and early 90s, and that's the Bill and Ted franchise. Now, this was starting with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and then eventually Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and then the third film that's coming out, Bill and Ted Face the Music, that's about to hit that's about to be released here the next about the end toward the end of the week or so. So now, before we get into the film, I gotta say that to go into a little bit of backstory, this is actually a franchise that even when I was a kid, I only saw really bits and pieces of both films growing up, and so it really wasn't until this year when I finally got to rewatch both of them in their entirety, because these are actually the movies that pretty much put Keanu Reeves on the map to him getting to mainstream success, and it showed that he was, because this is what he was playing for a little while, is playing the surfer dude type before he would start taking more serious roles. And with these two movies that came out, it also showed that they were able to mix science fiction with the whole, high school feel and everything. And it's movies that I've remember growing up fondly with, seeing parts of. It's just that I didn't really get to pay much close attention to until watching them just recently.
Now, the funny thing of my backstory is me being an 80s guy. Everybody knows that I'm mostly known as for the nostalgia, knowing about Revenge of Nerds, Porky's, and about everything 80s I know, and nostalgic and stuff with the early 90s. However, shockingly enough, while I did know who the characters were, and I have seen bits and pieces of the characters and scenes from YouTube, and I remember it being on TV or just was on when I was younger and stuff. I actually, when I watched him, because I watched both of them today, that's the first time I ever watched both movies completely.
Yeah,
And that is kind of weird because it's like it's unheard of for me to not know something, of something of this magnitude. I should have already seen these movies, but people are, it's probably going to be shocked that actually, technically, I really haven't. I just knew of them. I knew that they were huge and people talked about them. They were just this big deal. And now I finally watched them, both films, for the first time today, in the entirety, getting ready for this weekend's opening of Bill and Ted Face the Music. And these
yeah.
are films I should have watched years ago and should have known about. I mean, it's weird because it was one of those things I kind of knew the characters, like I did watch these movies, but I didn't see the movies.
Yeah, that's
It's
the
a
same thing
weird.
with me. These were films that I've heard a lot about in popular culture, and they would pretty much be the inspiration for. Well, they were more indirectly inspired by the whole, surfer type of California vibe
Yeah.
that we would actually get early established in Fast Times at Ridgemont High in that movie, and then it would later create the whole trend about the whoa and the party on dudes and stuff like that. It's that whole that talk that you would see in countless other incarnations.
Yeah, when we got it from Spicoli and Ridgemont High, the Fast Times at Ridgemont High, they pretty much was while people were getting in that trend of talking like that, the California talk, uh, Fast Times at Ridgemont High was the very first film to actually introduce it being as a trend, which we would start seeing throughout 80 comedies throughout the 80s, even in the 90s a little bit, because Michelangelo was even based off of that same talk with the radical dude. All right.
Right.
Uh, Nerves up, man. I mean, you look at him kind of like I don't know, the California surfing version of Beavis and Butthead. And it was a big deal in the 80s, people talking like that, especially if you lived around in the 80s in California. It was a big deal to just, it was careless, free, shirtless, just, I don't know. It's just it was his own little style that actually became big, and that's what Bill and Ted's their characters are based off of, and that's how they
Right.
talk and what they're famous for.
Right, and what was interesting was that to get into more of the film, the first movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, was directed by a director that was actually known for quite a lot of like hits of '80s films and '90s films. He was the director was Stephen Herrick, and he directed one of your favorite movies that you told me about that I saw bits of that I still need to fully watch this day as well. It was the first Critters film.
Yep,
And he would later do movies like Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, The Mighty Ducks, and the Three Musketeers movie from
yep.
the 90s. So, yeah. And so going into the first movie, this was, like I said, directed by Stephen Herrick and also has actually like one of George Carlin's earliest, well, not one of his earliest, but like the movie that like kind of put him more into like the mainstream for I guess you could say for more of the younger crowd when the movie came out and everything because it stars him and Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter and it
Yeah,
basically
basically, this film, when it came to the backstory of George Carlin, this is what made him mainstream as far as an actor because he's only been known for stand-up comedy.
yeah, because he had roles in like earlier films, but this is the one that got him into like the big mainstream vibe. Even though he had like earlier roles before, this is the one that basically said, okay, this is like his big movie that he did that showed
Yeah,
he can actually become an actor, and it shows right here, like after upon watching the film that you know he does definitely play quite an iconic character in this because in this movie he plays a the story deals where it's set in like the far future like it first starts out in like the far future it's in like 2688 where humanity is in like a utopian society based on the inspiration music philosophy what they call the great ones Bill and Ted as they are basically held by and to what they're doing is they want the three leaders that are there in the future. They want him, George Carlin's character Rufus, to go back in time to San Dimas, California, in order to pretty much get Bill and Ted to become the musical legends that they are and stuff, and
yeah,
also altering history, so to speak, because this is also the film that also you could get the idea that they also took inspiration from Doctor Who because they use a telephone where it goes back in time and stuff.
yeah. So
A phone
basically,
booth.
the story is there's like a little fluke in the history where they have to go back and help Bill and Ted past actual history, or their utopia is doomed. Because, like you were saying, everything's inspired by the great ones, which is Bill and Ted, and they're pretty much worshipped in the future. They become pretty much historians of the future, and they noticed there was like a little flaw in history and they needed to go fix it. So that's where George Carlin goes back in time to try to teach Bill and Ted to pass history because the story follows Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves as Bill and Ted, and pretty much they're past minorly past every subject, but history. If they don't pass history, they flunk out of school completely. And you
Mhm.
got Keanu Reeves' character who has like a military father who's basically saying, if you flunk, I'm sending you off to military school. And then Alex Winter's character is just pretty much going to be a street bum. He ain't going to have nothing really, but like maybe a burger flipping job at best. So these two decide to they meet George Carlin's character who comes into the storyline to tell them who they are in the future and all that stuff. And by the way, also just a quick add on, they're also like most of this type of figure of characters, they're really big on want to be rock stars, but they're failed at rock stars at that. They don't know how to play, so all that stuff. So basically, you got George Carlin's character who comes into play and tells them that they need, he's there for them to change, go back in time and learn history. And that's where you get the scripts of them going back into, the beginning of human age with the cavemen, and you got them going to Greece where we're kind of learning language and philosophy, and them going to like Joan the Arc and the Khan, from the notorious leader of the Mongolians, and just so on and so forth. And basically, the whole journey is them right in that little phone booth, going their famous phone booth, because it became an iconic following on that. And they pretty much travel in time, and they go to these worlds, these historian time periods, and grabbing leaders so they can pretty much take them to modern times to win over the history teacher to pass the class, the graduate.
Yeah, and it becomes pretty much a whole spool of shenanigans that these two get into, and while the movie doesn't really well, we'll get into some of what we discuss here later on. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but the whole novelty of them going back in time and stuff is really what sells this movie, because it shows that they're going on an adventure, going through history and stuff, and they're also trying to learn more about their actual history by going through the different periods and meeting the famous historical figures. And it also becomes pretty much a fish out of water kind of thing too, because one of them they actually come across is Napoleon, and they actually bring him, and he gets stuck in their time. And I gotta tell you, man, some of the most funniest shit I've seen the film was the parts where Napoleon is trying to trying to fit in with society and stuff. Like, he goes to the bowling alley, and he fucking throws the bowling ball, and he actually pushes himself out there, and he gets a gutter, and he starts saying shit several times in French.
And it's funny because, like, Napoleon, if you know your history, Napoleon was a ruthless French leader who was known for being really, really short. Like, I think the guy only stood maybe 4'11", maybe 5 foot even at best. So I did feel like they wasted it on the short jokes. They could have done a lot with that, but they never do. So, it would have been cool if they would have went to a theme park and they would have told him he's too short to ride rides. There was potential stuff that they could have really did with a lot of these historians that they failed at, or not really failed at, but they just didn't elaborate on more. Because I'll get into my cons a little bit, and one of the things I'm going to tell you overall why I'm a minority on these two films. But overall, yeah, it was cool. Get into my pros. I will say that obviously Keanu Reeves, Alex Winter, they own the roles as Bill and Ted. They're the best part of the movies. I love the whole California persona. It almost makes me feel like I'm watching Spicoli and Michelangelo in a movie together.
Yeah, from Turtles.
Yeah, because Michelangelo is basically inspired by that. The whole California dude, radical and shit.
Yeah.
So I love both their characters. I think they got great chemistry. Alex Winter is really famous in the '80s, so it wasn't hard for him to come into this movie versus like Keanu Reeves, who was kind of freshly new, despite did some minor stuff. But yeah, they have great chemistry. And I thought, while not being too serious, I thought when they chose the leaders of, like when they went back to Greece and all them, and got Abe Lincoln and all that stuff, I thought those actors nailed their fucking parts.
They did, yeah. They did,
So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I agree. Like, not only was the chemistry really great between them two, you see a lot of the fun that they had working on the movie and stuff, and just all the misadventures the adventures they get themselves into, going to these places and stuff. It shows that the friendship is very genuine, and it shows that even though they're not the brightest when it comes to like knowing certain things, but when they get into learning more about how things go on, they still have a good, sense of heart to them, and they're the guys that you want to hang out with,
Exactly. They come off as like, yes, they are stupid, they're dumb, but honestly, man, these would be guys I'd like to be around because they got very positive vibes. They're not depressing to be around. They're energetic. I love these characters. I mean, I would love to, hang out with these guys in real life. I mean, I think it would be funny, and just have it'd be pure entertainment. Yes, they are stupid, but they really. I like how when it shows that they really want to put something, spectacular in their own way. I feel like they learn better on their own persona, on their own direction, versus not being original and learning like people are learning like fucking like Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall, where everybody's learning the same shit like robots. You know, they got their own persona of learning things, and it works out in the end because they do learn a lot,
They
and it
do,
shows
yeah,
show at the end. But
yeah,
yeah, the set pieces where they go, I loved because it was cool seeing going to Greece, going to the Old West, get Billy the Kid. Um, I liked the setting of the where they go to cavemen. Too bad we couldn't see dinosaurs. That would have been neat, but that was kind of wasted a little bit. But they didn't do that. But anyways, then they go to France back in the old days. Then they drop in the middle of a war with Napoleon. I like these set pieces. I think they look authentic, and the whole medieval look they did when that one place they go to in England, I
yeah.
thought the set pieces were really good.
Yeah, they were. The production design really holds a lot of the great authenticity of the locations and stuff. It's basically if you took Back to the Future, but you're going to several different time periods altogether, which is funny
Exactly.
because not to skip ahead, but they actually did do a whole animated TV series with Bill and Ted. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
But yeah.
like you were saying too, like the the way that they get all the like the people the actors and that they get to portray all the historical figures was actually pretty authentic, and you really buy a lot of where they come from and stuff, the actors that they got for them and everything. And when they come into our real world, when it comes in later and they start getting into starting to try to fit around and stuff, it's just funny to see them actually try to fit in with our times, like when they go to the mall scene, which is my favorite scene of the whole movie,
Yeah.
where all the historical figures are having to split up, and they're because they're getting ready to go on they're hanging out there before they go to the high school for the historical presentation, and all the shit that they get into, like with Beethoven playing on the electric keyboard, and you got Genghis Khan in like the sporting goods store, and he's using a baseball bat and hitting shit.
Yeah.
Just it's just all the wacky shit. It's hilarious. You know.
It's heartwarming. It could have been far more funnier, but for what it was supposed to be very soft. In fact, I think this movie even got a PG.
It
It
was, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I liked how like when they brought him into modern times, and they're trying to adapt to like this so modern world, and you get like you said, Beethoven's on the damn electric thing, just using his talents, but more doing 80s style retroing, and then you got Genghis Khan. He was known for like having that big ass club, and he killed a lot of people, and it was cool seeing him like pick up a baseball bat. He's like, huh, and just doing crazy shit. You know what's really funny? And I guarantee this scene was inspired for this movie. All right, this movie was not the best of the trilogy, but I will say that I will admit the only good things about the movie was what I'm about to tell you. Remember in Ninja Turtles 3 when Casey Jones had to watch some Japanese guys and he was teaching them like hockey and all that modern shit? It reminds me of this movie being of that movie. Inspiration of that scene was from Bill and Ted, where Casey Jones is having to look over them. They're getting in all kinds of shit. I will tell you, while Ninja Turtles 3 isn't all that great compared to the first two films, I will say one of my favorite scenes of the three would be where Casey Jones is trying to modernize them Japanese guys from the Japanese dynasty. Because
Yeah,
or like hockey, and they're getting in fist fights and shit because they're seeing it on TV. Oh,
yeah.
shit.
It's
We'll say that's one of the good parts of that movie, even though that movie
I
did stink.
That's actually the only Turtles film that well, besides parts of the other that's the only Turtles live action film that I still haven't seen because I've only seen the first two.
Yeah. Uh,
But
the third one was a downward spiral as far as plot, but what happens in that one, off topic for a second, is basically the turtles have to replace. They hold this medallion to send them back in time in the Japanese dynasty back in like the old BCs or something. And when they're holding it, four Japanese soldiers from BC basically are holding at the same time. They switch timelines. So the old people, the Japanese from like the soldiers from like the BCs are stuck in our modern times, and basically Casey Jones has to take care of them.
Huh.
And
Yeah.
it brings back the original Casey Jones, and it's fucking hilarious. And even though the movie overall just kind of wasn't all that great, the better compared to the other two. But back to this film, I will say that and them going through time and their whole shenanigans don't really blend with the whole historic, so they're kind of like really off-putting and stuff. So it's got people like, who the fuck is this? Like they're dressed weird and shit, and then finally, we get to the end where they do the presentation, and it actually blows the historian's mind. And he was shocked how good it was, and ended up passing and stuff. And
Yeah.
along
And
the
we get
way, we meet these two girls. Little backstory in a medieval thing. They meet two good-looking girls that they end up falling over heels with, and they end up taking them out of that timeline during King George's rule, and they bring them to modern times, or King Henry, one of the two, and basically that's their girls that they end up getting with, and they end up forming the band together, and
yeah.
in the second movie. But yeah, this one with the Historia stuff, I thought that was kind of cool, where they basically everybody. I will say that one of my issues, they didn't give everybody enough screen time. Like Napoleon and Billy the Kid didn't have much talk, but like Abe Lincoln and all them who had more screen time at the presentation it really hit the mood of the movie at the end. So
Yeah.
uh,
Plus, it was funny hearing Abraham Lincoln say, "Party on, dudes."
yeah, it was basically taking all our historians and having them like radical and shit, like yeah, radical man, just turn them and just fucking with history and stuff. I will say there is a waste of potential that they could have done with a sequel where they fucked up history and have to go back and fix it, like Back to the Future. But I could see why they didn't do that, because of Back to the Future had to do it, was the storyline of that. So, anyways, I will say that other than that, now I get to my cons. My problem, and I'm gonna go. While it's on my mind, I'm gonna include this and Bogus Journey, just the overall franchise altogether. I, like I admitted earlier, I didn't fully watch these movies until now, but I knew of the characters and knew a lot about people talking about them and through pop culture and all that. And I will tell you this: is enough pop culture that the films, being talked about to this day. I thought they were supposed to be on some kind of epic scale level type of shit. And I've seen some YouTube videos, and I watched and I saw some scenes. I was like, I wanted to see these movies. I just didn't get to them, but I thought they were on, like, for them to be talked about today, they had to been like on like Princess Bride type of level or some shit on that kind of level, like Back to the Future level, or maybe Biodome type shit. And so upon seeing the movies, what really kind of bothered me was how generic overall and fast and short runtime these movies had. They were not at all on fucking any type of epic level, even though they were decent movies. I just was blown away because I was like, okay, this first movie, while we're on the topic, is only an hour and 28 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, the runtime to me felt like, if you would have had a better writer and director that really cared for these characters and them going back in time, they could have did a lot more than what they did. Because one of my issues is, because of the runtime so short, they really rushed through these historic time periods real quick, like way too quick, to the part that even some of them don't even have, but like maybe a 2 second scene, like Jonah the Ark, her world, they just grabbed her and that was it. It was like, that kind of bothered me, because I thought these movies were a lot bigger than what they were.
Yeah, I can see that because it also, keep in mind, this was also coming from, with probably with since these were more like, you could say this is also in the time when they were made by Orion Pictures, which they mainly deal with like a lot more lower grade type of independently type movies. So we're probably not going to get like the epic type of vibe that they were probably going to go for. I think that
Yeah,
probably also factors it in. But yeah, like you're saying, the potential, they don't take like full advantage of it, because that is one of my cons too. Is that a lot of the times when we go through the historical places and stuff that they go to, they kind of skim over them, and they're more like sketches. They're like drive-ins. They're good for a good short period, but then they go to the next scene, and it's very going to the next, just not really staying in one place, so to speak, because they don't have time.
That's what I'm trying to say, is it was really episodic, and I always thought, not seeing the movies, but know a lot about it from not seeing the movies. I thought that they were really stuck back in time in a lot of these historic periods. I didn't know that the whole movie was going to be based off them rushing through it just to get to the historian talent show presentation. And which, while I mean, it's a good idea that they were doing that presentation. I'm not bitching about that. I'm just saying, I thought it would have been better, like, if it was more like they were stuck. They kept getting stuck in these time periods with the phone booth not working. That's what I got out of it before I started watching it. That's how I always pictured this movie was about, and it was far from that. And I'm like, I wouldn't say that it was a bad thing, but I mean, it was kind of disappointing overall plot wise. And it's a shame that, as iconic the characters are, that I'd always thought these movies were on an epic scale, like Back to the Future level. I didn't know these movies were actually considered low budget independent guys, and that really kind of bothered me a little bit.
Well,
I
we
mean,
could say it's more with the first one, because the first one,
if it wasn't for the performances, I didn't really see anything that stuck out. That I was like, I wonder why these two movies really were considered, other than the performances of the characters, what was so really big about these films. And I'm not saying that the movie was bad, because it's not. None of them are bad. It just was like kind of, I don't know how to say it. It just, I might be a minority here when it comes to that, but I mean, I kind of questioned it. I was like, huh, wow, what's so big about these characters and the short run times? Because another issue I have in this film, and I'll get into the other movie about this, is when it comes to these short, sporadic plots, scenes of the historian things where they're in and out, that also comes into play with some bad editing, because they just jump into scenes, especially in the later half, where where they all get in trouble, they end up going to jail, and he has to break them out. And that's where you got that con where you're wondering where they got kind of lazy in the writing, where they can now, because there's this thing where, like, they have so many time periods where that themselves have came back from the past to the future to tell themselves, hey, do this and do that, or else this will fuck up. But they get rid of that, and basically they just say what they want to do to change history, and it just changes instantly. And that was an issue for me. And then the bad editing, where it just randomly gets to the fucking historic presentation, just sporadically just shows up, boom. So it has some bad editing too.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, because it's not very focused the way it plays it out with it. Now, one of the other, because that is my con too, is that the longevity. Because I get it. This is a movie where both of these movies are ones that you're not really meant to take seriously with them, the way they play it off. But if you're looking on like a more kind of like critical, logical standpoint, a lot of the conveniences that they have with the time travel, it comes into play in, well, the problem with both movies actually, where basically when they're basically predicting stuff that will happen with time travel and stuff, like they already know what's going to happen. That's where I kind of question, like, okay, how exactly would they know that they would have went back in time with that? And it's like,
Yeah.
you really wanted to add more probably with that and try probably answer some more longevity on that standpoint.
Yeah.
Like the part where they go in the police when they're trying to get all the Storefields out of jail, and then conveniently Ted ends up having a tape recorder that he planned ahead of time that's in there, even though it's funny because he's having a tape recorder saying, "Dad, I'm over here," or the fact that he's got his keys and not realizing he did have it, and then he has it. It's like, I kind of wonder, how did they know that unless they read the script?
Yeah. And yeah, that's basically it on that. I mean, I ain't got too much to really elaborate more, I will say that uh you know, did I like the film? Yes, I did. Do I feel like after watching it, you kind of question it? Maybe other than the characters, are the movies themselves, and you're not taken too seriously. Yes, they were meant to be just stupid fun, but I seen so much potential with the characters because I actually loved the characters. The characters themselves are like fucking A+ to me. But I felt like if somebody really cared about building from these characters, these didn't have to be dumb fun. They could have been dumb fun, but actually built on a like a 2 hour fucking, you know, like on a 2 hour good script. Like you could have done so much with these being stuck in the historic times and shit like that. You could have done cool shit with this movie. And that I felt like The Excellent Journey, while it has the highest rating over Bogus Journey, which I'm gonna get into on that, I kind of don't agree with that because honestly, I'm gonna admit right now, the next one we're about to talk about, Bogus Journey, I actually felt like was a little bit better of the movie because right now, the Excellent Journey was that's what it's called, right? The Excellent Journey.
Excellent Adventure.
Excellent Adventure. I keep calling it Excellent Journey. Excellent Adventure. I felt like that one holds like an 80% score, and it was highly praised by everybody, and that's why it got the sequel a couple years later. Um, and the second one got the really low score, and it splatted, and it was kind of really disappointment by amongst everybody, including critics. I don't get that. And I've noticed that a lot more people are getting that over the years where they're kind of like, where you kind of question, you go back to it 20, 30 years later, and you're like, yeah, that movie was actually better than the other one. I think more people are starting to notice that with Bogus Journey because I've seen a lot of people change their minds. But yeah, I personally don't think it's better than Bogus Journey. So
Right.
um, I the film to me, I'm going to be a minority here. While I liked, if I was to grade the characters alone and some of the stuff that they did, I would say phenomenal on like the characters. But honestly, as the overall film and what I was expecting with the cult following they had and what I got, I'm gonna be a minority here. I'm gonna have to go a really high average Joe on the Film Freaks meter on Excellent Adventure. I was not really blown away for what I should have been blown away on.
Yeah, I fair enough. I had a really great time with the film, and yeah, like I understand that on certain aspects of the story, there's a lot of potential that they really could have dived into more. But because I was so entertained by it, and because it just had so much like fun vibe and just like a lot of the stuff that they actually do go with, that I was
Yeah.
still invested with everything. I had more of that enjoyment part that I kind of have just a little above you in that regard. So with that, I'm going with just with a low compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter.
Okay.
Um, Now, another thing about one more thing about my pros, real quick. I was also George Carlin was also fun in the movie too. In fact, both movies he shows like his deadpan delivery, the way like he uh, talks in both of them. It's very well done. Like I love the way he plays it so serious, but it's just so fun to watch with him in this.
Yeah, I love George Carlin. His stand-up comedy is one of my favorites.
Yeah, and
One of the best stand-up comedians. Love
yeah,
it.
I love a lot of his stand up too. So all right. Now, after Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure came out, it was actually quite a monumental hit. It was a film that, for a low budget movie like that was made on $6.5 million. It broke. It was actually quite a hit, and it grossed over $40.5 million at the box office. And so naturally, a sequel would follow. And keep in mind, this was also around the time that before the second film, there was actually a lot of tie-ins that they did with the actual after the movie, including there was a television series that was actually two television series that aired. One was an animated series where they actually got the voices of Reeves, Alex Winter, and Carlin to return the rose in the first season. Never
I,
saw that, but I've actually heard it wasn't like too bad from what I've heard. Um,
yeah.
And then they also did a live action one that only ran for about 7 episodes in the summer of '92 after the second movie, and it was called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures as well. So I haven't seen that one, but they got a completely different cast altogether in that one. So uh,
Same chemistry, and it failed miserably. I have not seen the TV shows of either war, so I can't really judge. And I also keep in mind during this time, while we're on the subject, they also came out with video games, which I did not play.
I
So
same here. I knew of the video games. Well, the only thing I heard of the video game was when I saw the Angry Video Game Nerd review it, and he flat out pointed out that that was quite a mess of a game, the way it was played out with it. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah, there was a game called Bill and Ted's Excellent Video, or it was a video game called yeah, Bill and Ted's Excellent Video Game or whatever it was called, and it wasn't that excellent to begin with, from what I heard. So, but
yeah.
anyways,
One thing I do appreciate with the Excellent Adventure was they did capture the '80s vibe. Now,
yes,
this next one, I like how this next one really caught the early '90s vibe, and
yeah,
that is our next list right here is the sequel to Bill and Ted called Bogus Journey.
yep, which came out in 1991. Keep in mind, this came out the same year that we were starting to get fresh more in the '90s when we had Terminator 2 came out the same year.
Yep.
And this really showed that we were pretty much in that era with this point. And this can also kind of be kind of a contrast because around this time, we were slowly getting out of the 80s with the whole type of like music setting with it and starting to get more into like the grudge type era. And so you could tell at this point that while they were like pretty much at the very end of that era, it was starting to kind of like probably not be seen as much when the movie came out. Because Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, believe it or not, it didn't do quite as well as the first one did because even though it cost more, it still made a little bit less than what it made. This one they upped the budget this time, and you can tell because they ran up to 20 million this time. And in this one, it deals where they actually do something quite to up the ante on this time with Bill and Ted, where it's once again set in the far future, and in this time there's a gym teacher that's a terrorist that comes into play named Denomalos, who ends up in the future. It's when it's in the like the far future. It shows that Bill and Ted have their own university that's hailed as like the greats for the two, and they end up having the main bad guy come in to steal the phone booth to time travel, and he basically has the he wants to alter history and have a new society and stuff, and he ends up setting two identical robots that resemble Bill and Ted back in the future to kill them too. So they already put the stakes kind of high in at the start.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one, yeah, it's basically the guy who's actually funny enough. You say this is actually directed by a new director, but the previous director did Mighty Ducks, and it was funny that the villain is actually played by the old man who spoke to Emilio all the time, and the main kid from the Mighty Ducks series, the old man that did their skates and shit, was played the villain in the second movie. He's the
That's
guy,
right. Yeah.
and it's funny that yeah, but basically his story is he's jealous of the whole Bill and Ted utopia world, and he wants to make it about him. So he basically sends a copycat robot version of Alex Winter or Bill and Ted, and sends them back into the phone booth to go find the real Bill and Ted and actually kill our characters, and which we see. And that was actually, whoa, they really upped the anthem. This is a totally different tone while
Mhm.
having the same tones at the same time. Because this film actually gets really fucking dark and disturbing in some scenes, mainly in the
Yeah.
beginning. And
Yeah.
this is when our characters are, by the way, they brought everybody back. The dad is back. We finally get to meet the fucking soldier dude that he was supposed to go to military school if he failed. We get to meet that guy finally in this movie, and they're still with the two girls from England that they got with. And this one, I think they're out of high school now because they're kind of like got their own apartment together, so they're kind of grown up. And it also establishes, we didn't bring this up in the first movie, but the girl or Alex Winter's dad was banging a young girl, and that girl actually ended up leaving. I believe the
Yeah,
dad and got with and
Ted's
got with
dad.
yeah Ted's dad, and it's kind of like it was kind of funny, and everybody returned their the previous role for like cameos and stuff for the most part on certain scenes, but yeah, basically these robots go back, they kill Bill and Ted, they throw them off a cliff, and this is where we get the iconic meeting of one of the main faces. Actually, not seen these movies forever. This is one of the biggest faces that I still remember them putting with Bill and Ted, and that is the famous Grim Reaper played by William Sadler.
Yeah, and I remember when I was a kid, I that was actually what got me watching the film because the scenes I remember from this movie involved the scenes of William Sadler as Death, and already from the moment that he's on screen, I was like, okay, yeah, we're in quite a journey here. Let's see how this goes. And already from the get go, they end up they end up giving Def the what's called the a wedge. They give him what's called the Melvin by giving a wedgie and to get away from him. And because basically their souls are out of their bodies and they're just spirits at this point. So they end up going through some more pretty hilarious shenanigans this time where they're dead. And there's actually not only that scene was funny, but also my the part that laughed me out loud the most was the part where they go to the police station where Ted's dad is, and he ends up possessing him and the other guy that's there, and they talk just like them, the same mannerisms and shit, trying to warn the cops of where their bodies are, and it just the way they talk is just so hilarious.
Yeah, the way the dads, they actually, yeah, they pulled it off quite well in that partner of his detective partner. Yeah, but anyways, we actually get to meet William Sadler's death, and basically they get summons to hell at first, and they're shot down to hell, and they get down to hell, and I will tell you, this is where this film gets to its darkest. Actually, kind of shocked me, and this is why I kind of really preferred this movie on this because there was so much element added to it. And they actually get to see an actual Satan that looked legitimately creepy.
Yeah,
Split second didn't last long, cool, but he still looked like a bad motherfucker, like Satan would look like.
yeah,
And he puts them into this thing because they're sitting there trying to make a deal with him, and they thought that hey man, this guy Satan, you're cool and shit, and they're like, Satan just basically throws them in this little thing, and they're going. This is where I like to call the most Twilight Zone esque part of a film that ain't Twilight Zone I've ever fucking seen since Vivarium. And man, this shit was creepy. And actually, this film got criticized for that because the first movie was PG, very kidness and teenage loved. While this film took a more horror approach on some scenes, and it threw the tone off on a lot of people, but I actually kind of liked it. And it goes where like they're going in like these like rooms, and they see like really creepy scenes, like where there were kids, and there's one where I think it's Alex Winter's character walks into a thing, and it was like this old lady, and it becomes kind of like a Tim Burton type of world, like a one Alice in Wonderland shit, and it's him at a dinner table with his nasty grandma that almost resembles like she's a monster, like a Pennywise type of like a thing,
yeah.
and she's creepy shit, and you get these people singing like happy birthday in a more horror fucking like ooh, it was creepy, and it worked. It fucking worked. Holy
It did.
shit. The movie didn't intentionally not do that. Worked. It was a creepy fucking scene. And then the other one had a fucking weird ass Easter bunny after him. It kind of reminded me of that skit from the Twilight Zone, the movie, where the little boy does the little cartoon thing in
Yeah,
this scene. It kind of fucking, I will say it was fucking creepy, man. And
it
then yeah,
was.
also
Yeah,
a creepy image of the dude that wants Ted to go to boot camp, the soldier dude, and they're kind of fucking taunting him.
hmm yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, I like the whole like. This is I give this in two. I give him credit for two things with this. One, the art design, the way the color scheme works. gave me like it worked really well with how it's got like the whole blue where it's all in Ted's and where it's all in Bill's part, and then you got Ted's part where it's all in red and stuff. And it's just I love the attention to detail they put with these color schemes, and it does feel
Exactly.
very Twilight Zone esque. And
Yeah.
it is very that's you can also see that's where the budget was also up for because all the hell sequences and stuff they put a lot of craft into making everything look very artsy looking.
Is it me or does it seem weird that while the film is considered low budget, that this whole scene alone we're talking about seemed very practical, like a fucking Pee Wee's Adventure type shit.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of practical, like kind of Twilight Zone esque, like we were saying, and it just seemed like there was so much investment that still holds up today. Because watching it now, it still looked really creepy. It holds up.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically they get out of that situation, and my favorite part is the part where we're coming up where they go up to Death, and Death is basically saying, you got to play me in these games, and if you lose, you stay in hell for the rest of your lives. And I'm thinking, okay, what are they gonna do? Do that? Are they gonna do probably rock out together, and Death is gonna win that, or because that's what I always thought. I always heard was Death does a concert against them, like kind of like Tenacious D type shit. But no, it ends up being where they actually play legit games like Battleship, Twister, and all them other shit. And I'll tell you, this scene was fucking hilarious. This is one of my favorite parts of the movie because Death is
Yeah.
actually in every fucking game, and he keeps going. All right, best out of 3, best out of 5, best out of
Yeah.
7.
Yeah, that shit was hilarious, especially the part where they're playing Clue and all that and he loses every time. And then the funniest part where he's playing Twister and he's trying to move his foot over to the green part and he
Yeah,
can't fucking reach and then he falls. He's like, "Yes."
yeah. Fucking William Sallers was awesome as the fucking Grim Reaper. He was basically what George Carlin was in the first movie, but a
Yeah.
really because George Carlin actually takes a step back in this film a lot more than he was in the first film. He's basically in the beginning and the end. So it's
Yeah.
basically we follow William Sadler, and he actually becomes quite the trio because after losing, instead of going back to their bodies, they want to go to heaven and see what's up there to what they can do and take down these robots. And we get William Sadler's the Reaper actually becoming a third party of the group, and he follows them throughout the whole movie, and they go to heaven, and you get to see Einstein. I love how both films, despite what my disappointment on the epicness, I love how they were able still to keep bringing back iconic heroes like Einstein and a lot of smart geniuses from like the
Mhm.
past in the scene. And it's funny because they go to heaven and God basically gives them this thing. This is another funny part is when they're trying to get inside heaven and they don't look the part, so they kind of like beat these guys up and rob them. And the one that ends up getting a girl suit is the Reaper dude, William Sadler.
Yeah.
Give him shit. You can see Alex Winter in the fucking side trying to hold his laugh in, like
Yeah.
talking shit to him. And William Sadler's like, "Do I look good?" And they're like, "Yeah, man, you do." And you hear Alex Winter laughing.
Yeah.
I love how they pick on him, man. This is why I actually enjoyed the entire movie overall a lot better than I did the last movie because of shit
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I
that.
will say that it does up the comedy more, where it's more laughed out loud in the second one, even though the first one does have its funny moments that I did crack up with. But yeah, this one the gags they do with this are just their time really good, and they keep it going.
They end up doing a deal with God, go find the smartest scientists they have in heaven to help them build these robots that can actually take on these robots and that killed them. And they end up, surprisingly enough, out of all smart creatures, we end up a small smart people in the world. We end up seeing these two little alien creature looking things. Something that they look like trolls. They look like something out of like the movie Willow or fucking just something on that kind of level. And
Yeah, and
and
there's
they
a
start questioning like, what the hell? and these are the smartest ones. And that's when William Sadler said, well, we're not the only beings that are out there, and we're not the smartest. So it's like a poke fun at humans, saying that extraterrestrials out there are smarter than we are. We're like the dumb society, and that was kind of a cool thing they did. Basically, now they had these two little fucking little troll booger looking things following them around with the Grim Reaper and Bill and Ted, and they go back to modern time to take on these robots. And the Reaper actually, because he did lose those matches, he let their souls go back in their bodies.
Yeah, and the creature's called Station, is what they call them, and
yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because a fun fact about that, it's actually the on the one that actually portrays him is actually Tony Cox from Bad Santa and from Bad Santa and Me, Myself, and Irene. I just realized that.
Oh damn.
Yeah,
oh.
And they also the voice of it was because the voice of the one that plays the voice of it is actually Frank Welker, who you may remember he's done the voice of Scooby Doo and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But yeah, they go back and they get their bodies back, and they have to pretty much build in order to stop the evil Bill and Ted. They have to have the creature, the station creature, make a robot for them to actually take them down.
And that's another good scene right here, because they actually have to go into kind of like a Home Depot or electronics store. And it's funny because you got two fucking stoner California looking dudes. You got a Grim Reaper and his two little booger looking things walk in the store, and you see these people like, what the fuck?
and there's that part where that dude where Def is walking by and he sees a guy look at him, and he's like, because the guy's smoking a cigarette, and he's like, you'll be gone soon. I'll get to you soon.
Yeah, because he's dead, obviously. Kind of like what's his face did in Drive Angry, where
right,
he tells
William Fichtner.
Yeah, because he knows. Yeah, and they grab all kinds of shit. And they end up building robots out of them, and much like the first movie. Again, this is where I have the issue where they stick to just being generic, and they just from here the editing goes off again like the first movie, and they just get to the point, and we get to our climax, which is Battle of the Bands, which kind of pissed me off a little bit because they don't even show anybody actually doing anything, because by the time they get there, everybody's already played and you didn't even see it at all. It's already their turn. And I'm like, that didn't feel like Battle of the Bands. And not to mention the crowd looks very, how can I say this? The crowd looks very picked out of the bunch, and the way they're sitting looks very, it looks like they picked people out of the streets to play, extras. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Just by, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. It didn't resemble anything Battle of the Band-ish to me. So it kind of bothered me. But anyways, I get to the point, and these robots at the time have been raking havoc trying to make them look bad. Like, example, they cause the girls to leave them. They break all their shit. They basically are plotting to kill the English girlfriends, and they tie them up. And basically these robots, and this is where I was kind of disappointed too, because it was very anticlimactic, because when these robots actually take on the other robots that killed them, it's over in like 2 seconds. Literally.
It was pretty rushed there, because they all they do is they punch them, like they punch their heads up, and then they punch them away where they explode. And it's like, you could have probably put more, of a actual, climax there. Pretty easy.
That's what these films lack of, is a lot of effort, and that's why and we'll get to our overall the franchise until we can see the third one. But yeah, and then that's whenever the villain, which is really weird, because the villain, we have to complain this because we usually do it in other films. The villain isn't really in this film hardly at all, and he comes at his natural climax, and he's basically battling. And much like what we complained about the first one, they use their future selves telling them what they planned again. and that's to defeat the villain by like taking his gun away, trapping him in a cage. And then the guy's like, well, I have this, I go back in time a lot too, and I plan my future, and I had the key. And they said, well, we technically knew you were going to do that, so we gave you a fake gun, even though it was funny with the where it came out and said bang, like Joker gun,
Mhm.
which was funny. But the fact that they made that and they said that all the keys fake and all this and all that, I'm like, oh my god, that was kind of a disappointment and shit
Yeah.
like. And and this is where I'm going to really have a problem with going into 3. So the villain is defeated. You got everybody having a blast. They're starting this song. Because what it is technically they're still don't know how they're going to fucking win this, because they realize, hey man, we're still never learned, and they actually pops out of nowhere because George Carlin comes back in this scene. We get the futuristic version of them two, where they're experienced at fucking music at this time, and themselves came from the future back to the past, modern times for us, but came from the future. And they brought their English girlfriends with them, and now they have kids. And here's the part that I think is I do not get. I don't know how they're going to pull this off, because they ended up having children, and you do see in the third movie they have 2 daughters. Well, it is revealed in this movie they have 2 sons, and they
Uh,
were as sons.
well, I think see, I did hear that because to be fair, I know they don't flat out like really get much focus on them when they show up in the end of it. But
Yeah.
they did say that the two babies that show up at the very end are actually girls. And while they are called Little Bill and Little Ted, in the third one, they did confirm that their actual names in the film are actually their own father's names. So, like in the third one, the daughter is called Thea, and the other girl is named Billy. So you could get the idea that they're still called Little Bill and Little Ted because that's what their nicknames are for when they actually name them.
All right. Well, here's the problem. I'm very good at this, and I can tell you one thing. Not to mention, I do recall somebody saying him or he. Those babies they had in their backs were wearing very boyish shit, and they actually were boys. You could actually tell they were actually boys, not girls, like the babies used, at least, you know, because, they don't know the future if they're going to make a third movie or not. And at the
Right, I got
time,
you. It's just
at
it's
the time,
hard. It's
they actually probably had an idea where they were going to have sons. They were going to hand the torch off. Unfortunately, the movie, flopped horribly, and they never came about doing a third movie. And now we live in a different time period where we're kind of seeing kind of a gender bend thing going on. So because of that, I feel like they kind of gonna just trick us into say they were girls. But it's kind of hard to look at scene and then go to this movie and say, "What the fuck? You had boys, man." So it's gonna be kind of hard for me to take in and try to just ignore it. I don't know. We'll see how I feel about the third movie. But anyways, they're good at playing music, and I thought there was more to it, and the fucking movie just abruptly ended. And I'm like, oh man.
yeah, it basically showed that they end up becoming like the iconic musicians that span like so much history, and became the legend, that became the iconic figures that the future societies and stuff would recognize them for. Now, before we get into the third one, there's something that we do kind of have to bring up about that because
Yeah,
the third one,
we still got to break down our pros and cons for this film
yeah, so I'm
first.
saying. So
So
with my pros,
I will say that one my biggest pros, obviously, Bill and Ted. I can't say much about them that I didn't say in the earlier film. They are still got the chemistry going. And it was cool seeing that they were able to pull off the good and the bad guys and play two different personas of each other, but they still work great. William Sadler fucking really steals the show for me here. I did I did wish he was had like way more lines. I wish he did. Because really I was into his character a lot, and they could have done way more with him. But what we were given, I enjoyed his character. I loved him. I wanted more of William Sadler Reaper. I actually can't. I hope they use him a lot in the third movie,
Yeah.
because he's awesome. But I did thought the fucking story was written a lot better than the first one, because it felt like while it did have the same issues as the first one, when they kind of, you could tell in the third act they were kind of like, all right, let's get to the point. We ain't got that much money to keep making bigger story. The first 3/4 of the movie, they actually built a more coherent story. It was not very generic. It was actually trying to build something, and the product design was really, I felt like, was more upped. The money put involved was more upped. The a lot. I personally liked the dark tone this film went. A lot of people didn't, and a lot of people didn't like this one compared to the first one. I am starting to see a new trend growing where people actually prefer this one because of the Grim Reaper and some of the shit. But at the time, people didn't. I personally think this one was better than the first movie.
Yeah, I personally thought that this one to me had more of the, not only worked better with its story the way it played it out, but I also thought it did a lot more unique premise with the way it was going for it with it. And it was a lot more funnier than expected than I thought than the first movie did, even though I still thought the first one was hilarious in parts. And so both movies, you look at them as like the products of their time, so to speak. There were films that were able to capture that. They're movies that this, both of them in their own right became cult followings for the type of movie, for the type of like fun, just 80s early 90s type of science fiction type comedy that does what it does best with it. And I think it really holds up as creating two really fun characters that you want to they have such a likable presence that it seems like even with the third one coming out, that even if it does turn out good, it still shows that they have a likable presence on screen that you just can't take your eyes off.
Exactly, and I will say that again, they had great. It was cool seeing that they had more people that joined them. That was joining them on their journey, like the first one. They're able to do newer shit, not really copy the first one. I like the dark horror approach. The comedy was a lot better in this film, in my opinion. Even though the comedy was good in the first one, I just thought they really upped. William Sadler really, I mean, that helped with him as the Reaper, as being fucked around with being picked on by Bill and Ted. And I liked, just there was some things just was more entertaining, even though both films are entertaining. I felt this one was a little bit more entertaining up until that third act. I will admit the third act was not that good, but if I go back to the first one, I had the same issue. So both films suffer from the same exact issue. The third act really is where they give up and they rush it because they ain't got the money. So you can kind of tell in both films. So I don't.
Yeah,
But overall, I will say that it's weird because I'm going to say that even though I like Bogus Journey a little bit better, I'm going to give both these films the same score. I'm going to give Bogus Journey a high average Joe as well, because I feel like they both had its pros and cons. Even though I will say this one was a little bit better. Again, I thought, why was, why did I have the impression that William Sadler was really a show stealer? And he was, but why did I thought it was supposed to be on an epic level? And then I watch this and he really doesn't talk much and he's not used to his potential. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, man, after watching both these movies, man, I was like, they're good, they're entertaining for what they were, but I thought they were done on a more higher budget. I don't know
yeah,
why I films stories. And again, runtime, another issue. It's fast. It's over with quick. And both these films felt like I watched a short story more than I watched the full length film. And I don't get it. Like, I thought there was more to their characters. In fact, the longest time before watching both movies, I thought the Grim Reaper and the fucking phone booth thing in the first movie was all of the same movie.
Yeah, true. But
I
yeah,
went
that's
back watching it for the first time, like, huh, they're actually two separate movies. Because those are the only two things that are iconic with Bill and Ted. Everything else really isn't. And it's like, I'm not saying these movies are bad. I'm giving them high average, so they're a little bit above average. They are above average, but I just don't think they're they're compelling enough for me. But they're still decent. They're still decent. It's hard to explain. I'm in the minority here. I was not fully. I'm not full. Other than the characters, I'm really not getting the writing. Why people like these movies on the writing standpoint. I get what they're trying to do, but I think that they could have done a lot better with these movies if you would have took these two cool characters and gave them to better writers. And I'm hoping the third one learned the lesson, even though you don't want to go too different from the other two because that could hurt the other two films, and I don't want it to hurt the other two films. And
right.
that's when we're getting ready to get the Bill and Ted 3 coming out, Face the Music. And I will say, judging by the trailers on that one of the issues that could be a problem is it's very polished.
Yeah, I before we get into the third one, like you were saying, going back to my overall feelings with the second one is like you were saying, the dark tone is great. It's good to see, they had a more focused story this time and everything. And yeah, Archon's pretty much falling the same with not taking full advantage on some of the things and kind of going through a lot of the same rushed problems and the convenience on certain things. But like you're saying, like the movies have their entertaining vibes to where it's more like you enjoy them for what they are, so to speak. So with that,
Yeah.
before getting to the third one, I'm giving that one more because I like this one over the first movie. I go with just regular compelling for the Film Freaks meter.
That's cool.
Um,
And you know what's really cool? I would love to see maybe Kevin Smith, if he wants to touch something that's Hollywoodized, touch these movies because I think he can actually. I think you'd be able to write these characters better.
yeah, yeah, I could see that.
I just feel like he could write a good plot line because he can legit write a long movie and give a lot of journey to two characters. There's nothing wrong with Bill and Ted. Them characters are awesome. They're A+ in my
Right,
book.
because I mean, if you look at it, they also kind of had an inspiration for Jay and Silent Bob in some way, even though Jay and Silent Bob are stoners, but they still have like the slacker type like they get into. They're like the older versions of
Hey,
Bill and Ted.
but now going into 3, seeing the trailers, and there's some things that are look promising. Unfortunately, I did look at the runtime, and they're doing the runtime short again. I think that's like its persona, its thing to make it short, make it sweet, and get to the point. And I hate that they are going to probably do that again. Maybe in today's time they're going to be able to write it better in under hour 30 minutes because we are now in this new time of age where movies can do a lot in an hour and 30 minutes sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah,
And what I do like how we're seeing this trend where we're seeing classic people who haven't been around in over 20 something years or 30 or 40 coming back to do a kind of goodbye, as a goodbye to the character, and maybe a passing the torch looks like with the daughters. And I have no issue them having daughters. I think they look pretty promising. I think they look interesting. I do feel like the film looks too polished, but it's cool that Keanu Reeves, who went from used to do that, but he hasn't done that kind of vibe in a long time because he just does straight up dark movies. So it was cool to see he wanted to come back and play this dark, or play this stoner, California stoner guy never grew up like Alex Winter was able to. And it's cool to see Alex Winter come back because the guy doesn't act anymore. He was known for 80s and 90s. Now he does just documentaries. He's behind the screen now. He doesn't do
yeah,
anything. He said, I will come back for this character. I like that the characters are back.
yeah.
Does
They
it
even
come?
got believe it or
They
not,
Kelly.
they even got to the dad. The dad from the first two movies is back, along with they even got the stepmom. So a lot of the main cast with, well, of course, past may he rest in peace, George Carlin can't come back, but they are doing something with George Carlin too in some way because they're doing a tribute to him and showing basically archival footage of him that will be shown in the film. And there's also a character that's in the film that has relations with his character, so we're gonna get something of him in the movie.
That's cool. And it's cool. William Sadler is going to come back as the Reaper. I really love him. Other than Bill and Ted, I think he's like my other favorite of the franchise is him coming back. And my thing is, does the California Yo Dude Radical, does that shit really hold up today?
I
Does
mean,
it stick?
not really. It was more of a product for its time, so to speak. So yeah, it's more of that. Like doing it nowadays would be hard because the struggle I think what they also did was for the last decade or so they just the both of them coming back to do this type of role. They wanted to try to have it based off the script. They had to go if they wanted to keep it as faithful to the other two films as much as possible with the
I,
characters and the same type of tone that they were going for with the other two films.
you don't need them to like take their tone away completely, but I'm all for revisiting iconic characters we haven't seen in so many decades, and it gives them a send off because this is supposed to be the only one they're going to do,
Yeah,
and it's the trilogy they wanted because they didn't get a trilogy they wanted because two bombed really bad. They ended
yeah,
it from
yeah. Because two only
and
was a modest. It wasn't a hit because when two came out, it only barely went over its budget. So wasn't quite a. It wasn't a success. So with this one, it's
it,
not only, but it's also that, but you got to also think too with Keanu Reeves having in the resonance this period where he's made a comeback. This was actually something that he actually was really on board with, and he wanted to do it for the fans. So you can see a lot of the the willingness for him to come back along with getting Alex Winter back. You can see that they want to have fun again and be able to bring us so much joy like we saw in the other two films.
Yeah, I'm still anxious to see the movie. I'm really looking forward to see what 3 does. I didn't hate these movies by any means. I don't think they were really bad at all. And I'm anxious to see what they got in store for us. And it's cool seeing it from what the trailers and the poster show that they're going to keep it faithful to the two films by bringing the iconic characters back, the same storyline being played. Apparently,
Because
this time it's doing the same shit again where they have to fix something yet again, and now they got daughters who are
yeah,
involved.
and it also deals with the middle age of them too, because they're trying to basically crank out a hit song and show their destiny. So it actually takes the interesting premise of them, not being quite the successful like they used to be and stuff. So I think it's gonna with them facing the music, it comes full. I think it'll come full circle with them doing what they do best as musicians.
I actually thought the synopsis looks pretty interesting. This could potentially actually. A lot of people might hate me for this nostalgia people because me, I'm all about the nostalgia over this newer shit that we see a lot of times. Every now and then, I like something new better than the old version. Um, it being one of the prime examples, chapter 1 and 2. But I this could potentially be the best one. I mean, we might surprise, and we're going to be seeing it this week, and Justin and I are going to review it, and that's why we did this review, this retro review.
Yeah, and so in hindsight, with the Bill and Ted films, like I said, they're very enjoyable films on their own. And while three we're hoping will still be good, and probably won't be as good as the other two films. But the novelty of having these characters on screen alone, like they're just always going to be in our hearts as very likable guys, and they'll always have enjoyable stuff to have, even if the movies themselves don't have like the best like stories with them. They can still just keep us entertained.
Yeah, at this point, I guess I could just, so it doesn't shadow 1 and 2 to the point it don't make sense. It might be best that they stick with what they're known for and just keep it simple. But like I said, I wish 1 and 2 could have been handled with better care than what they were handled with as far as story and the length of the movie. And you could have done where they were stuck in time. I mean, you could have done so much with these characters, and it just, yeah, it is what it is. They're I wouldn't necessarily call them rewatchability type movies, in my opinion. I'm sorry to say that. I'm a rarity in that, but they were decent enough, and I love the characters. That's weird for me to love these characters, but not really be so invested in their entire story, even though both of them had some interesting things. Like, I love the historic going back and grabbing iconic characters and shit like that. I love seeing Satan and the Reaper and God. I love seeing these people portray these characters are authentic from like the famous people like Einstein, Joan of Arc, Abraham Lincoln, Genghis Khan, and so on and so forth. I liked all that shit from 1 and 2. It's just everything else. The writing was what really pained me because they weren't all that good on the writing. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
but
hear
anyways,
you.
for me,
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we thank you so much for listening to our retrospective of both of the Bill and Ted films. And for those of you who have also seen both of the movies, and also the TV series that they also did for both of them, let us know in the comments below what you thought about them as well. And we thank you so much for your time and listening to us, and thank you for listening to our retro. And stay safe, and we'll be seeing you in our next review. We'll see you later.
later.